Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Biblical Lit. I am Pastor Sarah Stovey from Bayshore Lutheran Church, and this is week 10. It's awesome, isn't it? Week 10, we are reading Joshua chapter 8 through Judges chapter 5. Now, I have a couple things I want to say in the beginning of this vlog. First of all, we missed the entire story of Rahab last week, and that is just too important to not talk about. And then this week, I barely have time to even mention the book of Judges, which we actually would be ending on the story of Deborah. So, while I don't like making more work for myself, I'm going to have another vlog, which totally focuses on the story of Rahab and then focuses on the story of Deborah. I think it's very important that we highlight these two women in these two Old Testament books. And I think it's really important for us to see where Rahab fits in the scheme of things, because she does show up in Jesus's genealogy, and also how Deborah fits in the scheme of things and how her role defined how things would be for Israel and how she came to that. But I am getting ahead of myself. Okay, so that, watch for an extra, maybe a part 2 of week 10. But for now, let's focus on Joshua 8 through Judges 3. Let's just say that. Okay, so first of all, take a deep breath. Joshua 8 starts out pretty harshly, doesn't it? It really does. We have God telling Joshua to destroy a city that I call Ai. Okay, it's A-I, so I. And Joshua does it. And the chapter 8 is all about how Joshua follows the Lord's instructions perfectly, without question. I mentioned that last week. Without any questions, Joshua does what the Lord says to do, and he utterly destroys the city of Ai. He kills everyone. And that's really hard to take. It's barbaric, and it's certainly nothing that we agree with now. And so I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I'm just not into this book of Joshua. And why is Pastor Sarah into this book of Joshua? Well, for me, Joshua is more than just the battles. There's also in the back end of Joshua some very important things. I'm going to highlight that here in just a second. But for me, Joshua is that book in your trilogy, the second one, where the first one's great, the second one is the foundation and more world building, and then the third one, it becomes great again. Or for Harry Potter fans, book 5. You know what I'm talking about. That's Joshua. And I love those details. I actually liked book 5. I like those books that are transitional. I've always liked that. And for me, that's what Joshua is. Joshua brings Israel from where they are with Moses into a new system, into the new land. And we can't have that transition without the book of Joshua. So chapter 8 is very hard. I know that, but keep reading. And in chapter 10, I'm just going to highlight this out to you if you want to not read every single paragraph word for word. In chapter 10, God tells Joshua again to do something, and Joshua's like, I don't think I'll have enough time. And so what does Joshua do? Well, Joshua in chapter 10, verse 12, one day the Lord gave the Amorites over to the Israelites, and Joshua spoke to the Lord, and he said in the sight of Israel, sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Aijalon. And guess what? God heard Joshua and halted the sun. God paused the day so that way Joshua and all of Israel would have enough time to defeat the enemy, to defeat the people. And so that's how close Joshua and God were. That's how close that they were. God would tell Joshua to do something. Joshua would do it without question. And then in this instance, Joshua says to God above, stop the sun for me. And God does. So again, this is in that transitional book. But let's just say you're like, I just can't do this, Pastor Sarah. There's just too much slaughtering. There's just too many details of, warfare. Go to chapter 11. If you go to chapter 11 and you go to verse 16, you have 2 paragraphs that basically summarize what Joshua does and does it in a more condensed version. It explains in first verse of 16, Joshua took all the land. And then it explains to you who he took it from, where it was from. It explains all of the details of the warfare that are in previous chapters. So if that's easier for you to stomach, I understand. Go to chapter 11, verse 16, read until the end. Now, after all this conquering and after all of the taking over the promised land, the land of Canaan, which God promised all those many generations ago to Abram and to Abraham's descendants, we get to the part where after this chapter 11 summary, it's just chapter after chapter of Joshua dividing the land. Now you're thinking, I want to skip this. And you can. You really can. If you want, you can go with me to chapter 3 next. But if you have the time, and if you want to understand some of the issues that are going to be coming up in our readings, some of the issues between the tribes, you need to read these next few chapters where Joshua gives the land to the tribes. Joshua allots certain cities for certain purposes, creates cities of refuge and sanctuary, allows the Levitical priests to have control over certain cities. That's really important. Come 1 Samuel. If you can read through all the detail, maybe get a map. Get a map of where the 12 tribes are and follow along a little bit. Because if you can visually see who has what land, and if you get a map that actually shows you the mountain terrains and where the deserts are, and you can see what's green and what's not, you might then see some of the reasons why we have troubles coming up in 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. You might then understand why the tribe of Benjamin was not well loved. Just do it if you're able to. Just go through it. I know that those are going to be a lot of words, a lot of people, a lot of places that you won't know. But again, a good map would help. But how Joshua allots the land determines how the tribes in their lands behave, whether they can succeed or not, whether they're able to be prosperous or not. It's an interesting insight into the whole 12 tribes, and it lets us know why there's so much tension after the book of Joshua, especially in Judges. So if you're able, do pick that up. But if you can't, join me in chapter 23 right now. Go ahead and go all the way forward into chapter 23. And chapter 23 is when Joshua now faces all of Israel. They've all been given the land that they're going to have, and they've all been told this is what you're going to do. And then Joshua warns Israel. Joshua warns Israel by reminding them about everything that had happened prior to this moment, about how Moses led them out through the wilderness, how Joshua led them into the promised land, how God was there. God promised this land. God gave us this land. We had to fight for it. We had to earn it. We have done so now. So what are you supposed to do, Joshua says? Love the Lord your God. Joshua says, hold fast, verse 8, hold fast to the Lord your God as you have done this day. Hold fast. Love the Lord your God, Joshua says. Joshua warns them about intermarriage with those from outside tribes because they didn't destroy everybody. And when they moved in, some of the people actually took on the tribe themselves and said, we will join you as people of God. Some people didn't, and Joshua obviously didn't slaughter all of them. He let them live in harmony where they were as long as they let Israel be in charge. And Joshua's saying, don't intermarry with them. Stay true to each other. Stay within your tribes. Build your families. Love the Lord your God. Okay? And Joshua knows he's nearing the end of his time because in verse 14 of chapter 23, Joshua says, and now I'm about to go the way of all the earth. Meaning, I'm going to die soon. Joshua's been fighting really hard. And when Joshua finally dies, he's 110. And he has seen a lot. He has seen more than anyone else possible. And he warns them and says, this is what we are to do. Keep the covenant. Love the Lord your God. So in chapter 24, and I realize I'm summarizing here, but I have a feeling you're not going to read it. Chapter 24, the people and the tribes agree to revere the Lord and to keep the covenant. And the people of the Lord recommit themselves to God. Just like they did at Mount Sinai with Moses, they do this now with God. And Joshua says, don't make a promise you can't keep. And they're like, nope, we're going to make this promise. And so the Lord our God, they say, we will serve and him we will obey. So verse 25, so Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and made statutes and ordinances for them at Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and he took a large stone and set up there under the oak in the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said to all the people, see, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord that he spoke to us. Therefore it shall be a witness against you if you deal falsely with your God. And Joshua sent the people away to their inheritances. I find this really important to stress that, Joshua says at one point too, choose who you will serve this day. And then many of us have this like on a tablet or something in our home. Choose ye this day whom you shall serve. But as for me and my house, we shall serve the Lord. I myself have this in my own house. But it's true. It's true. Who do you serve? And have you renewed your pledge to serve God? It becomes something very important to the whole nation of Israel to renew this covenant with God and to reassure God, we still pledge ourselves to you. We still serve you. And Joshua is all about that. Joshua is going to die. In fact, literally at the end of the book of Joshua, Joshua does die. And then we have a little bit of overlap when we enter the book of Judges, because you think, wow, we've now got our land. We've defeated our enemies. There's going to be peace, right? Not so much. Judges is all about how hard it was for Israel to settle into the promised land, to keep serving God and to loving God, and to also follow the rules of God. And so in a really unique way, we have in the book of Judges stories of people who in the end pick up the mantle, if you will, of what Joshua left behind with his death, and they help Israel continue to maintain and keep the land. And I am going to stop, as I had said, at chapter 3 with Judges. I'm going to have to stop because I'm running out of time, as I can see. And I do want us to talk about Deborah as a judge and what it is she did for the people of Israel. But again, Judges shows a history of them settling into the promised land and how difficult that was. It wasn't meant to be heaven on earth. A land flowing with milk and honey is an idiom that means it's a place that has everything you need to live. It does not mean that it's going to be easy to live there. I had an Old Testament professor explain that to me once, and it just clicked. I had always sat in a pew and heard the phrase, land of milk and honey, thinking, oh, it's going to be so wonderful. It'll be like the Garden of Eden. And that's not what it is. That's not what God promised. God promised land for them to live and to be with. God did not say it would be easy. And maybe that's a takeaway we can have this week, is that sometimes what we are to do and where we are is where we are to be. It's just not as easy as we want it to be. So my friends, I will make a special vlog about Rahab because she's very special. I will also share about Deborah as well, so maybe watch for that later in the week. And join me next week for week 11 when we talk about Judges 6 through Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 3. And I hope you're enjoying our time together. And if you are, be sure to like this video. Be sure to share it. It helps with our visibility. But most of all, I just hope that your spirit life is being enriched by these short vlogs. Blessings.